and welcome to the Abundant Self Podcast, a podcast where we talk about everything there is to learn and to know about what it truly means to have life and life in abundance. My name is Sharon Chebai, and thank you so much for tuning in. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time it is that you're tuning in to today's episode. I hope you are well and staying safe wherever it is that you are. If this is your very first time here, my good name is Sharon Chobai, and welcome to the Abundant Self Podcast. Thank you once again for joining us for yet another episode. This is episode 6 of the podcast, and today we are going to be talking about how to be mentally attractive. Now, at the time of publishing this episode, Monday was World Mental Health Day, and so we saw that it was going to be timely for us to talk about how to be mentally attractive, what it means to be mentally attractive, and why it is important. But before I get on there, allow me to recap what we talked about in the previous episode, that is episode 5, where we were essentially talking about imposter syndrome, and most importantly, how to handle imposter syndrome. And of course, from the conversation that we had, we were able to get very good feedback, very encouraging feedback. So I thank you for listening, thank you for tuning in, and thank you for sharing your feedback with me. If you weren't able to listen to the episode, then go right ahead. Just press pause, go back and just listen to episode 5, or you could just finish this episode, and then after you're done, you can go back and listen to episode 5 on handling imposter syndrome, where we were basically talking about how to put that notorious little voice in our heads that likes to tell us that we're not good enough, that we're frauds, in its rightful place. So yes, be sure to listen to that and let us know what you think. So during that episode, we were able to publish a poll and a Q&A where we were asking, was this the first time you were learning about imposter syndrome, and how has imposter syndrome affected the quality of your life? And out of the poll, 33% of you said yes, that is, this was actually their first time learning about imposter syndrome, and 67% said no, meaning that they already knew about imposter syndrome. So whether or not it was your first time or it wasn't your first time, I hope that you were able to learn something about imposter syndrome and that it was able to shed light on how to handle it. Like I said, the other question we were asking is, how has imposter syndrome affected the quality of your life? And we got a very great answer. Allow me to read it. Mary said, wow, now I know why I have always procrastinated some of the things I wanted to do. That is, thinking I'm not good enough or dismissing what I want to share as irrelevant. May God help us to put everything behind and trust God for His excellent workmanship. Yes, He made us perfect and complete, and the capabilities He put in us is because He designed us for it. I now feel unstoppable. So thank you, Mary, for your feedback. Thank you for your answer. And yes, if you haven't yet listened to the podcast or that particular episode, then go right ahead and listen to it and let me know what you think. How has imposter syndrome affected the quality of your life? For me, I remember saying that it stopped me for a very long time from pursuing the things that I was passionate about. But right now, it doesn't mean that I have moved on necessarily from imposter syndrome, because there are moments when that voice is still a constant nudge in my head. But right now I am still able to just go after the things that I love, and even when that notorious little voice tries to lie to me, telling me that I'm a fraud waiting to be found out, I think it's just constantly reminding myself, why am I here? And why is this important to me? And why do I need to share this information? Yes, so Let me know what you think. And as always, we appreciate your feedback. And I'm happy to know that we are finding value in the conversations that we have already had here on the podcast. So I'd also like to appreciate and give a special shout out to those of you who have reached out to me directly with your feedback with regards to the podcast in general. I mean, even if it wasn't like about the episode, thank you for those who have been reaching out to me directly to let me know what they think about the podcast so far, and even those who reached out to me to let me know their thoughts on the episode on imposter syndrome. So we have a listener from Brazil who sent us a very heartfelt message on my Instagram saying that she loves the podcast and was appreciating how we are nourishing each other from different parts of the world. And I mean, yes, it is honestly very humbling to know that I might be here at home in Kenya, but this message is, being reached to as many people as possible. And every time I go to my analytics and see the people who have been listening, to see the countries where they come from, I mean, it's very encouraging. It's very inspiring and humbling, like I said, to know that this message is one that is being related not only to people or to my audience here in Kenya, but to those from around the world. So thank you to our Brazil listener. And allow me to also just mention a few of the countries that have been listening in. Of course, we have Kenya, we have Brazil, we have United States, Norway, Canada, Argentina, Mauritius, Italy, Costa Rica. We also have, let me see. Okay, just a minute. But yes, thank you and shout out to all my listeners, whether here in Kenya or outside Kenya, abroad. Thank you for taking the time to listen in and tune in to the podcast. I hope, and it is my prayer, that these conversations are actually meaningful and of value to you. So yes, Costa Rica, United Kingdom, and India. Yes. Thanks a lot, guys, and shout out to you. I appreciate you, and thank you for being part of the Abundant Self community. So we also had a listener from Kenya who reached out to mention how the previous episode on imposter syndrome spoke to her current situation. And like I said, it was really encouraging to know that what we do here really and truly matters. So a big shout out to all of you, both beautiful ladies, for reaching out to me, and to you who's on the other end of this earphone, AirPod, whatever it is. Thank you. Thank you for being part of the Abundant Self community. And on to today's segment of What Am I Learning? So if you were with us in the previous episode, you know that we introduced a new segment on the show that is the What Am I Learning segment, where I share with you, the listeners, some of the things that I have been learning, at least ever since we published our latest episode. And seeing that we were talking about imposter syndrome and how well to handle it, when I read the feedback and the comments that I got from one of the listeners, it took me back to what I had shared on the previous episode about how I was not sure whether or not I had what it took to start this podcast. Now, if you recall, when we talk about imposter syndrome, there's that element that even though you have past or previous achievements, one finds it hard to shake off that feeling that they are a fraud. And most of the time, they tend to attribute their successes to external factors, such as luck. Now, in my scenario, even after I had already started the podcast, if you remember me saying, that notorious inner voice kept nudging at me, lying to me that I was not good enough, and, that the podcast would flop eventually. So it's amazing how, after reading some of the comments and the feedback that I got from our listeners, that I was immediately reminded why I decided to start the podcast and how that has been the fuel that I needed to keep going. I mean, like I said, every single time I was thinking about starting my podcast, there was always that voice inside of me that was always telling me, you can't do this, you're not good enough. I mean, there's so many other people who must be doing a much better job than you are. And surely, if you start a podcast, yours would flop, it would fail because it would not be as good as what other people were doing. And I know that this is something that very many of us can relate to. It doesn't have to be starting a podcast. Sometimes you want to do something, you want to go after a certain opportunity, whether it's applying for a job or just starting something of your own, and you feel like you're not good enough because, someone else has already done it or someone else is already doing it and they're doing a much better job. I remember telling one of our listeners, the one who reached out to me, that I always like to believe that nothing, absolutely nothing, is an original idea. Nothing, I don't think there's anything that truly is an original thought. And even if it is, maybe it has a different twist to it, So that should not stop you from going after what you want to do. I mean, like myself, there's so many people who are doing podcasts on abundance. But what makes my podcast different? What value am I offering that other people are not? It's not to say that I'm better than them or they are better than me. It's just that we are offering different value that is actually needed, by the world, by our audience. All we're just doing is just adding a different voice to it to give a different perspective on how we think about abundance and what have you. So when I read this comments, when I read this feedback, I remember just saying, this is why I started the podcast. And that for me, like I said, was the fuel that I needed to keep going. Like the fuel that reminded me, yes, you started this podcast because you wanted to reach out to people and encourage them that there's more to life than just eating, sleeping, paying bills and dying. There's actually something that each of us has within us that we have to offer to the world. And I believe that is what we mean by living life to the fullest, living life in abundance. Living life in abundance is not just about doing the mundane things of life. It's excelling and enjoying life, the fullness of life in each and every area of our lives. Yeah. So this is for you. You who wants to start something and are still not sure whether or not you should keep pursuing that dream or soon to be actualized idea. You who have already started feeling like you are running out of the fuel or the zeal you had when starting. This is me reminding you to go back and remind yourself why you have decided to take on this path. Why are you doing this? Why is it important to you that you pursue this certain course of action? I hope that just like me, answering these questions will help rejuvenate your spirit and get you right where you need to be. And if you remember nothing else, I hope you remember that I am rooting for you, always. And now on to the topic of today. Like I said, today we are going to be talking about how to be mentally attractive. And like I said at the beginning of the episode, at the time of publishing this episode, it was World Mental Health Day on Monday. And as always, the message we are spreading is that we need to make mental health and well-being for all a global priority. So, we are all familiar with mental health issues. We are all familiar with matters mental health. And this is something that I think has become even more prevalent in our current generation because we are seeing very many people suffer from mental health issues, mental health disorders. And this is something that we cannot afford to ignore anymore. This is something that our children are being taught or being made aware of in school. We are seeing even churches take the time to just have counseling departments, whatever it is, religious institutions, just recognizing and admitting to the fact that mental health is actually something that is becoming, an issue for both young and old people, and it is something that needs to be addressed. And if you already follow me on the blog that is on Chibai by Span, you may have already come across this topic on being mentally attractive and what it truly means. And I remember at the time when I was writing this article on how to be mentally attractive, it actually came about after I had written a previous article where I was talking about why we need to have a reading culture, where people need to start to learn or teach themselves rather how to love reading, because one of the benefits of reading is that it makes you mentally attractive. And I remember in the comments, like, people were very interested in this whole concept of being mentally attractive, and I decided, okay, let's make this a whole topic of its own and try and dissect it and debunk and understand what it truly means to be mentally attractive. But I remember when I was writing that article on reading and why reading helps you to be mentally attractive, I was just thinking about how this, I don't know, have you ever met these people who are very well read, people who understand things of the world or whatever it is, people who are knowledgeable in a certain area or a certain topic or issue, and it's actually very attractive to just listen, to sit down and listen to what they have to say. I mean, sometimes just because you're knowledgeable doesn't mean you're mentally attractive, but when people have the right knowledge, when people have the right information, listening to them and their perspective on things is actually usually like a breath of fresh air, because what that kind of conversation does is that it sort of feeds into your what you already know. It feeds into what you have already learned for yourself, whatever it is. So for example, if we are talking about nutrition, I have my own understanding of nutrition, but when I meet someone who, has a deeper understanding or a deeper knowledge of nutrition, I mean, getting to listen and to learn from them just adds more insight, adds more understanding and perspective to my own understanding, my own individual understanding. So when it comes to issues of mental health, just to now converge the idea of being mentally attractive and mental health, is that when we think about mental health, there are a lot of contributing factors that determine whether or not we are mentally healthy. And when you think about it, like I said, mental health has become the order of the day, and it is something that many, if not all of us, can actually relate to. And many of us, we know people who have suffered from mental health issues, and we are always constantly being reminded that we need to be conscious about our mental health, who and what we choose to interact and relate with, how we react to certain situations, and even the steps that we need to take whenever we feel like, our mental health is deteriorating. But when it comes to the context of our conversation today, I want us to look at mental health from the perspective of what we choose to feed our minds with, because that is actually a contributing factor when it comes to mental health. I know there are very many other things that contribute to mental health. I know, like during the pandemic, for example, loss of livelihoods, people lost their jobs, people lost their loved ones. I mean, this was a whole disease that many of us have never experienced in our lifetimes. It took a lot of getting used to the fact that for many of us, especially people who are extroverted or people whose careers or their daily lives involve being around people, the fact that we were now in our homes, locked up alone in our homes, and we couldn't interact with people face to face, most of us, our mental health did take a huge blow. Now there's that context, but there's also this other context of our mental health can actually be affected by what we choose to feed our minds with. And that is what we mean by being mentally attractive. So how do we become mentally attractive? By consciously being aware of the kind of information, the kind of content that we feed our minds with. Now, today, it is no debate that we are constantly being bombarded with information left, right, and center. I mean, one way or another, we are either feeding our minds with or through the books we read, what we watch, the music we listen to, the podcast we listen to, like this one, for example. But how many of us are actually consuming the right content or information? I remember when I was writing about being mentally attractive, I came across this quote that talked about how reading the right books has an impact on, the kind of person you become and how you reason out things. And I remember when I came across that quote, what stood out for me was the word right. When it said reading the right books, meaning, there are very many books out there, but what kind of books are you reading and how are they influencing the kind of person that you become? Because the truth of the matter is, by the way, not all books out there are there to build you, or not all books out there are meant to nourish your mind. There are books that do very well to nourish our mental well-being, to inform the kind of decisions that we make. But there are also other books that I don't know. For me, I know I have come across books where I read and I'm like, okay, no, I don't think this is for me. So when we think about that, there's also the idea of, when we talk about nourishment, now that we're talking about books that nourish us, there's also the part of nourishment versus fluff, where we choose content that nourishes our minds, nourishes our hearts, our spirits, who we are, our inner man. And then there's also the place for fluff. By fluff, we're talking about entertainment, just passive consuming of content. And when I say this, I think I'm just quickly reminded. Let me just use an example that I like to think about in my personal life, and that is when it comes to my watching preferences. So like many of you, one of the ways that I like to, just chill and relax after a long day or after a long week is Netflix. I don't know about you, but personally, every time I'm on Netflix, chances are I am watching Korean drama. And my friends know this. People who've known me for quite a long time know that I love K-drama. I love Korean drama. So every time I'm on Netflix, I am most probably watching K-drama. Right now, I think if someone were to list out Korean drama, the other day my younger brother was talking to me about a Korean series that he was watching, and I'm like, yeah, I have watched that. And then, it was just a whole different thing. But anyway, back to the point is that I love Korean drama. So most of the time, if I just want some downtime just to chill and relax, I'll be watching K-drama. And by the way, just to mention, most of this K-drama series, usually they're not like 40 or 30 minutes long. They are pretty long episodes. So you find like a series has like 16 to 50 hour long episodes. Yes. And that is like one. Usually they don't have, I think the Korean drama that I've watched, they don't have like two seasons. It's usually like one season, and it has like 16 to 50. I think the longest series I ever watched Korean drama was 52 episodes, and they were all an hour long. So you can imagine, if I decided to binge such a series, I'd probably be wasting a lot of time, and I would have nourished my mind. No, I'd just be consuming a lot of fluff where I'm just sitting there watching Netflix all day long. I probably have a lot of other things to do, but you know how, you can just be there watching. I know you understand and relate to this feeling where you're watching a pretty interesting series and you're telling yourself, you know what, I'm just going to watch one episode and then I go to sleep, or I'm going to watch one episode and then continue the rest of the day. Maybe you're watching Netflix in your break time, but you just know it's a scam, because especially if you're watching those very intense series, I don't know if it's better watching a movie or a series, but anyway, I digress. So because this, Korean drama are my thing, I seriously legit love Koreans. I could watch like up to 3 or 4 or even 5 episodes back to back without noticing the time moving. And especially when it's this juicy, I mean, it's drama, so it has juicy drama. I mean, it's so enjoyable. There are all this manner of cliffhangers. Sometimes I can even find myself, okay, I haven't pulled an all-nighter with a series before. I mean, with a Korean drama series before, but I know I have pulled an all-nighter with a series without breaking a sweat. But let me tell you, you know how you indulge, I don't know, are they called guilty pleasures? Where you indulge in something and then afterwards you're just feeling, oh my days, what a waste of time. Oh my days. Okay, I should have been sleeping, but I have spent the whole entire night watching this series. The next day, if you're going to work or if you have things to do, you of course now you're working on lack of sleep and you're not productive throughout the day. But in that moment, all you wanted to do was, watch the next episode, see what will happen next and what have you. But what does that do to us mentally? Like I said, spending a lot of time on fluff and not nourishment. I mean, there is a space. I mean, don't get me wrong, by the way. There is a space and a place for nourishing your mind, and there's a place for fluff. If I sit down, if my entire week is just spent on Netflix, if my entire week is just spent on watching movies or what have you, then what does that do to me mentally? Will I even have the fuel that I need to go after the things that I want to do? Because most of this time, I don't know, but I always feel that if I watch a lot of, if I'm sitting down and I'm watching like episodes back to back, I actually even get more exhausted than I was at the beginning. And it's very ironic because when I was turning on the Netflix or when I was turning on the TV to just catch a movie or an episode or whatever, it's usually just so that I can chill and have some downtime. But usually when I binge, I get more exhausted. And usually even if I had like other things to do afterwards, like if I had planned that, okay, I'm going to take this break to watch an episode and then maybe after that I'll maybe write an article or do whatever it is, and then I end up watching more hours of Netflix than I should have, then I don't even have the energy to go ahead and do what I wanted to do. And what does that do? It makes you guilty. It makes you feel bad about yourself, and then you start lagging on your goals. I mean, all that influences the kind of person that you are, even mentally, because all you've been doing is feeding your mind with fluff. I mean, where is the space of nourishing your mind? What are you doing right now that is nourishing your mind? What books are you reading? Even movies. I mean, sometimes you can actually watch a movie and it can really inspire you. I don't know about you, but sometimes you just watch a movie and it sparks something inside of you and it makes you want to take a certain course of action. Or even documentaries, actually. You can be watching a documentary. It leaves you more knowledgeable. It leaves you more, feeling insightful and feeling all smart and or whatever. But the point is, there's that place for fluff. There's that place of, just wanting to entertain yourself a little or reward yourself. Sometimes I think I have used Netflix as a reward system, because I've noticed, hey, I love my Korean drama. In fact, I love Korean drama so much that even when I'm watching any other thing, if it's not Korean, I still think that it should have subtitles. So I'm always looking at the bottom. I'm always looking at the bottom of the screen and I'm like, this is just English. It doesn't have subtitles. But anyway, so what are you doing? What are you doing to feed your mind? What are you watching? What are you listening to? Even the music. I mean, today we have a very, very interesting and diverse music culture. And sometimes you can just listen to a certain song and you're like, oof. I mean, there's a time, I don't know where I was. I think I was with a friend of mine, and this is actually very interesting. They had put their playlist, I remember, and they had a song on their phone that I really liked. So you know how if you have, especially if it wasn't the only song in the playlist, of course, the minute the song ends, it's going to automatically play the next song, like on Spotify. So after I listened, I mean, when this song was on, I really liked it. I think it was from an animation. Yes, it was this song. We don't talk about Bruno from, what was the name of this? Encanto, from the Encanto animation. If you've watched it, so we don't talk about Bruno was on his playlist, and so when it played, I was like, yeah, wow, I like the song. I didn't know you have it on your playlist. So the song played, and then it ended, and then the next song. Oh my days, the next song. Oof. The next song had, like, seriously, a lot of cuss words, a lot of, I mean, I think it just caught me off guard, and I just looked at him and I was like, okay. So, I mean, I didn't want to judge him, but I was like, so this is, I remember asking, so this is the music you listen to? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, could you change? I told him, could you change it, please? Because, I mean, for me, I know that I I honestly, personally, do not like anything that has curse words. And I mean, that was like seriously nasty, dirty language. And I could not handle it. I know there are people who can handle that, but for me, I could not handle it. And I was like, hey, okay. So, I mean, for that, because for me, I'm always thinking, I mean, if I'm constantly listening to music that has that kind of language, chances are I am going to be speaking that language. I mean, take for example Korean drama. I watch a lot of Korean drama that if it's even possible for me to look away, you know, when you're watching Korean drama and you're not Korean, you're watching the subtitles. Essentially, you're watching the subtitles. So if for a minute you decide to look away and not read the subtitles, then you just miss out on the whole conversation. But for me, I think right now where I'm at with my Korean drama, I think I have learned a lot of Korean language, like, you know, saying thank you, please, saying I love you, saying no, you know, such basic things that even if I look away, I'd still be able to catch on. So the same thing, what we feed our mind has an effect on the people we become. I mean, when look at, for example, reading. Someone who likes reading somehow becomes a better writer, and they even become a better speaker. You know, they become eloquent in their speech. They speak better, you know, they have rich vocabulary or what have you. So the same way, when you talk about garbage in and garbage out, it actually makes, I mean, it is so eye-opening in the sense that if you're constantly feeding your mind with negativity, toxicity, or content, information that is not right for your mental health, then trust me, your mental health is going to deteriorate. When you're constantly feeding your mind with fluff, and you don't have a space for nourishing your mind, you will not become mentally attractive, in the sense that even when you have to contribute, even when you have to talk about certain issues, topical issues that, you know, people are talking about. I don't know, have you ever been in a situation where people are talking about something and you have no idea what it is they're talking about? I mean, someone could even be talking about how to, I can't even think about an example, but you can be in a situation where people are talking about a certain topical issue and you have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. There is no even way you can contribute to that conversation. And sometimes it could be either because of ignorance or because you do not are not interested. I mean, sometimes you cannot be interested in everything, you know, we cannot be knowledgeable in everything. But there's also that place where you don't have anything to contribute because you're just ignorant. And because most of the time, what you spend your time doing is entertainment. And how does that feed into the kind of person you become? So what we choose to feed our minds with, or rather what we spend time feeding our minds with, determines whether or not we are mentally attractive. I mean, take for example your own physical well-being. If you want to be healthy, if you want to be in good shape, then you have to be conscious of the kind of food you eat, you know. Are you going to be eating junk all the time, or are you going to have a space where, you know, you're eating your vegetables, you're eating rich foods with nutrients? You know, I mean, everyone loves to have their pizza or their KFC once in a while, but you can't constantly be eating pizza in KFC. There's a space for that, there's a place for that, and then there's a place for, eating your vegetables, eating your greens, eating, foods that are rich in vitamins, nutrients, whatever it is. So if you want to have an attractive physique, then you have to be careful of how you treat your body, what you feed it, how you take care of it, whether you exercise, whatever it is. So the same thing happens for our minds. In order to be mentally attractive, we need to be very careful of the kind of things we feed it with. And I mean, think about it. Social media, for example, is flooded with a lot of negativity, toxicity, dare I say even rottenness, that has a huge impact on our mental health. I mean, yes, we do have people who are, using social media to spread the right message. But if you're not careful to filter out how much of this content we consume, we end up becoming just as mindless and corrupt as what we consume. Like I said before, I personally love reading books. I love listening to podcasts. I love watching my Korean drama, but that doesn't mean that I go reading all books, I go listening to all podcasts, and I go watching all Korean drama. I mean, yes, I love watching Korean drama, but there's Korean drama that I cannot watch. I can just, yes, I can, I love Korean drama, but I can just click on a certain series and I watch it and I'm like, okay, I don't think this is going to be good for me. This is too toxic. So just the other day, I was catching up with my best friend. I remember, just to speak onto that example of, when you just watch, you see a series and it looks like, okay, this is something, or even a movie, you see it and then you're like, okay, this looks like something I can watch. And then when you go ahead and watch it, you're like, no, this is not for me. So something similar like that happened to me, I think last month, where I started watching a series on Netflix, and and I was starting, it was pretty enjoyable. And then I met up with my best friend, we were catching up, and she told me, we're just catching up, and then she happened to mention what she was watching, and then she mentioned that particular series. And then I was like, wow, so we are watching the same series. I mean, it was very exciting. And then she's like, but then it got to a point, there's this episode that, they were doing this and that, and I didn't like it, honestly. It was too much for me. And for me, even though I hadn't gotten to that episode, I was still in the first season. For her, I think she had watched up until the fourth or third season. And that is when there was that episode that really made her stop watching the series. I mean, just hearing her say that, because we share the same values and I could relate to what she was talking about, I immediately stopped watching that series, because I was like, hey, if this is what is awaiting me ahead, then imagine, it's not a must. I don't have to watch this series. I think there are other better things that I can watch, or I can even just go and get that book that I've been reading and catch up with my reading, read that chapter, and instead it's going to nourish my mind and I won't have to ruin my whole mood. Because the truth of the matter is, in as much as, yes, there's a lot of information out there, there's a lot of content, movies, whatever it is, I mean, literally almost every single home has a smartphone, has a device where you can access the internet, you can get a paid subscription for Netflix or whatever it is, there's YouTube, there's so many things. And in as much as it's right there at our fingertips, in as much as it is readily available, we get to choose what we get to consume. And I mean, what is right for you cannot be right for me. I mean, there are people who enjoy listening to music that has a lot of curse words. There are people who enjoy watching a certain kind of movies that for you may not be your thing, right? So it's always up to you to decide what is healthy for me. How much of this can I handle? I remember, like my friend was saying, when she started watching that series, she was watching it because of the storyline. And I mean, yes, I'm not going to mention the name of the series, but yes, it has a interesting storyline. So you can put up with the storyline, but you can only put up with it up to a certain level. I mean, when it gets to a certain level where it starts becoming toxic, even for you, I mean, surely the storyline, you do not have to feed yourself with toxicity for the sake of the storyline. Definitely not. But that is all up to you. You get to decide what is right and what is not right for you. So what am I saying? We have the liberty to choose what is right for our own well-being, whether mentally, whether emotionally, and even spiritually. Yeah? So in as much as it's everywhere, like you can even get, like here in Kenya, you can get into the public transport, our matatus, and there's screens everywhere and there's this music and you're like, okay. For me, I even like, these days I even get to the boring old matatus that don't even have this music. I mean, yes, I have had a long day. I think I just want to go home in silence. Even if everyone in the bus is snoring, that is absolutely fine. But I do not want to have to step out of the bus having seen a lot of scenes that were not exactly good for my for my viewing, and then I just go back feeling I don't feel so good about myself, So we have the liberty to choose what is right for us, even when you're in a situation when you can't exactly control the kind of content you're consuming. I mean, I don't know. There's always a way in which you can just choose to just choose your battles. What can you handle? I mean, you can handle certain content up to a certain level, and sometimes you can just choose, I cannot handle it at all. So like for me, because I know that when I get into this loud matatus that have this loud music and screens everywhere with people doing all sorts of things, because I know that I don't enjoy it and it doesn't work well for my mental well-being or even my spiritual well-being, I choose to go for the old boring matatus where I know, yes, it is quiet, yes, it is boring, but when I get home, I'll have not gotten a headache from the loud music. I'll be feeling much better and I'll even be ready to settle down and complete the day in a good note. Yeah. So I came across this quote that says, "You are the books you read, you are the things you watch, the people you spend your time with, the conversations you engage in. So choose wisely what you feed your mind with." And that is essentially what we are talking about today. And like it says, I mean, even the people and the conversations that we have can have an impact on our mental health and our being mentally attractive. Sometimes you can be with people, you can literally be sitting with people and the conversation is just feeding into your mind, feeding into your spirit. I remember just this past week I visited my old school, my campus, and I met my good friend of mine and we were just talking. And I remember after when I came back home, I was like, wow, honestly, I really needed to see my friend. I really needed to just hear from him and just learn from him, because he's also way older than myself. And I remember I was sharing with him what I'm currently going through in this current season of my life. And what he actually spoke life into my situation. I mean, he spoke with very encouraging words. He was encouraging me. We made fun a little, but when I left there, I left rejuvenated. I left nourished. And these are the kind of people we need to surround ourselves with. Sometimes you can just surround yourself with people who do not speak any sort of positivity in your life. You can just be with someone and all you do, even for example, is gossip. All you do is talk about how someone else did not do this, or how people, just always constantly talking bad things about people, gossiping about people. What does that do to you? Even if you aren't someone who used to gossip, you become someone who gossips, because the people we surround ourselves with, the conversations we have, all that feeds into the kind of people we become. So that even if you weren't that kind of person, just by being in that space where you're constantly feeding from these people. Because at the end of the day, when I'm having a conversation with someone, when I'm engaging with someone, surely there has to be something that they're feeding into me, and there has to be something that I'm feeding into them. Sometimes, of course, there's that place where you're just meeting to catch up, have fun, and all that. But that cannot be the only thing that we are doing, right? There should be a place where I'm actually adding value into the life of my friends, into the life of my loved ones, into the life of those who are around me. And there's actually this saying, I think I had it in a movie. Yes, I had it in a movie, and it was saying, this character was saying, I can't remember which movie it was that I was watching, but the character was saying that if you spend a lot of time, he was telling the other person that if you spend a lot of time lying in a pigsty, you end up stinking like the pigs that live there. And I think for this context, it really makes a lot of sense, because when you spend time with people who are only talking about, either gossiping or having meaningless talk, whatever it is, you find yourself also becoming that person who that is all you ever do. And trust me, I don't think people want to be surrounded, or people want to be part of conversations that matter, because there's a way you feel when you have had a conversation. There's a way you feel when you're talking to your friend, or you're having a meaningful conversation that leaves you better than you were before, that leaves you more learned, more insightful, more educated, or more informed. And that is what it means when we talk about being mentally attractive. So the people you allow to speak into your life, the conversations you have with your friends, with your loved ones, when you sieve through them, just go right ahead and sieve through them. Can you honestly say that they're adding any value to you? Or are they putting your well-being at risk? And what about you? Are you feeding the lives of other people? When you think about yourself, the conversations that you're having with your friends, with your community, whoever it may be, or the people you engage with, is there any value that you're also adding to them? Because it's not a matter of just receiving value. There's also a place of us also adding value in the lives of other people. So I like to think that our minds are like gardens, and that what we feed our minds are like seeds, that determine what kind of plants get to grow in our minds, and whether this particular garden is lush and full of every good thing that you can possibly think of. Think about the best garden. I know there's this garden, is it in Dubai? I don't know, what is the name of that garden? I can't remember, but it's one of the most beautiful, I think, gardens or spaces that I have ever seen. I haven't been there physically, but I think I'd want to go there. It's so beautiful. It has beautiful flowers, beautiful plants, even the way it has been, the landscape. It looks so beautiful. Think of your mind like a garden. If you're constantly feeding your mind with the right information, healthy content, having healthy conversations, interacting with healthy people, then your garden, your mind, it gets to flourish. It gets to be abundant. And when you're operating with such a mind, your mindset also becomes healthy. How you get to look at life becomes healthy. How you relate with other people becomes healthy. The output becomes healthy. If you're putting in good things, and of course, good things are also going to come out. People will want to to have conversations with you, because they know every time I talk to Sharon, every time I talk to Chabai, I always leave feeling refreshed. I always leave feeling encouraged, feeling motivated, whatever it is. So, for me, this has actually been the thorn in my flesh, because, who doesn't love entertainment? Who doesn't love having that extra episode on Netflix, that cliffhanger, that keeps us at the edge of our seats? But is it nourishing my mind when I'm sitting down all day or night on Netflix? So like I said, I want you to remember this. And this is something that I also wrote on my blog, that is Chabai by Spen. And I remember writing and saying that our personality traits Our character and our mindsets are a product of what we feed our minds with. And yes, while there is a downside to having all kinds of information readily available, the bright side is that we have the power, you have the power, to choose what kind of information will serve the kind of person you want to be. So anytime you're about to either read a book, watch a movie, consume any other content online or offline, ask yourself, is this helping me grow? Am I feeding my mind with all the right information? And what do I seek to benefit from this? Is it just solely on entertainment? Or is there more that I can gain? And like I said, it's important to learn that there's a place for entertainment. There's a place for, watching Korean drama. But there's also a place of nourishing your mind. Reading a chapter of a book. And just also listening to something encouraging. And usually when we take the time to invest in our nourishment, in our own personal nourishment, that is usually the fuel that we need to go after the things we love and we want to do. All right, so that is it for today's episode. Like I said, today we were talking about how to be mentally attractive by being conscious of the things that we feed our mind. And seeing that this was, or rather just a few days ago, we were having World Mental Health Day, it was important for us to also talk about how to be mentally attractive. So if you want to learn more about this conversation in particular, be sure to check out Chebaibai Pen, and I will be sure to leave a link to that particular article on the show notes. And like I said previously, if you have no idea what Chebaibai Pen is all about, we have a bonus episode that will help you to understand just that. So be sure to listen in, as well as check out our website to learn this and so much more. As always, if you have any thoughts or feedback that you'd like to add, we have a link in the show notes where you can record a voice message. Yes, I know many of us are not that excited about hearing our own voices, but you can send me a voice message if you're comfortable, and who knows, you might just hear yourself in the next episode. Again, a big thank you to those of you who have already subscribed to the podcast. I appreciate your support, and I look forward to the journey ahead of us. Like I always like to say, if you haven't already, no pressure. We are still glad to have you here with us. Be sure to check us out on our social media pages, that is on Instagram and Facebook and on Twitter at The Abundant Self. And remember that we are currently available on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, and on Pocket Casts. I hope to see and hear you in the next episode, where we will be talking about authenticity and what it means to stay true to who you are called to be. So until next time, bye-bye. There you have it. This has been the Abundant Self podcast with me, Sharon Chebaibai. If this episode has been helpful to you, feel free to share it with your friends and family. We'd also love to hear from you. If you have any feedback or questions relating to today's episode, then go ahead and leave us a voice message on the hotline number in the show notes. Feel free to also rate and review us from wherever you get your podcasts. If you remember nothing else from today's episode, I hope you remember that you have been called to have life and life in abundance, and that I am rooting for you always.